She worked retail, ate the same $2 meal every day, and lived in a basement with no windows. But Lena wasn't broke. She was planning something, quietly saving, investing, escaping. And at 35, she disappeared, not in a luxury, into freedom. Watch the full story. Retail worker, 35, retired. The break room smelled like microwave regret. Burnt popcorn, reheated beans, something sweet someone left too long in the fridge. And under it all, the smell of exhaustion. It was 2:05 p.m., and Lena Morales sat at the same table she always did. Second from a back. Plastic chair. Cracked linoleum beneath her. She peeled the foil off her lunch. Rice, black beans, spinach. The same thing she'd made every night this week. The same thing she would make tomorrow. Across from her, a coworker tapped endlessly on their phone. Another scrolled through Instagram reels with the volume on. A third picked at a vending machine sandwich. Eyes glazed over. No one really talked in the break room anymore. Just chewing. Just scrolling. Just surviving. But Lena, she was doing something else. She was building an escape plan. She pulled out her notebook. The cover was battered, corners curling. The inside was filled with pages of small, frantic handwriting. Charts, arrows, percentages, circled numbers. None of it made much sense if you were just glancing. But Lena wasn't just glancing. She was rehearsing her exit. Every day, every lunch break. And today, the number on the top of the page stared back at her like a dare. $7,423. It wasn't much. Not by most standards. Not by any standards, really. But it was hers. Every dollar scraped together from retail shifts, skipped dinners, coupons, and pure stubbornness. Lena Morales worked at Big Buy, one of those blue-shirt, smile-on-command places that sold TVs and Bluetooth speakers and things she couldn't afford. She was 35, made $15.75 an hour. Full-time, no benefits, no union. Clock in, clock out. Her feet hurt most days. Her back more often. She hadn't had a vacation in 5 years. But here's the thing. She wasn't trapped. Not anymore. The first time she'd heard about fire, financial independence, retire early, she'd been in a dentist's waiting room, of all places. A cheap clinic. Cracked vinyl chairs. She picked up someone else's abandoned phone and scrolled. A blog post. Something about retiring at 40 by living frugally and investing everything. She laughed. Then she kept reading. And by the time her name was called, something inside her had changed. It sounded like a fantasy, but it didn't feel like one. Fire wasn't about making six figures. It was about spending less. Much less. Living differently. Quietly. With intention. She could do that. She already was. That night she went home, clicked off her data plan, turned on Wi-Fi, and fell into a YouTube hole that would change her life. Stories of janitors retiring with millions. Freelancers in Thailand. School teachers who lived on half their income and bought duplexes in cash. They all had one thing in common. They stopped believing the system was built for them. Because it wasn't. Lena knew that too well. She'd played by the rules her whole life. Never bought designer clothes. Never had cable. Never carried a balance on her credit cards. And still, she was working double shifts just to buy groceries and keep the lights on. So she stopped playing by the rules. She started writing her own. The notebook became her Bible. Her blueprint. Her secret weapon. While her coworkers complained about hours being cut or joked about retirement at 80, Lena was calculating how long it would take her to get out. 3.5 years. Maybe 4. Not to live rich. Just to stop living like this. She started investing. Quietly. Low-cost index funds. No noise. No bragging. No one at work knew. Not even her sister. She didn't tell people. Not because she was ashamed. Because she knew what they'd say. You're wasting your time. You'll never save enough. You make minimum wage, girl. Be realistic. But Lena had run the numbers. If she could live on $1,000 a month, just $1,000, she could retire with less than most people thought possible. That's when she found it. A single word buried in a blog post that cracked open a world. Geoarbitrage. Move to a country with a lower cost of living. Live on less. Thrive on less. Thailand. Portugal. Mexico. Vietnam. Places where rent was $300 and no one cared about your 401k. Suddenly, the idea wasn't insane anymore. It was math. And Lena was good at math. In the break room, She took a deep breath. Her coworkers kept scrolling, kept chewing. The microwave beeped somewhere behind her, but she didn't flinch. She was staring at the numbers. Her numbers. Her future. She worked 42 hours last week. Took home just over $500. She put $200 in her brokerage account. The rest went to rent, food, and bus fare. No Starbucks. No new clothes. No streaming services. She'd even started line drying her laundry to save a few extra dollars. It wasn't easy. There were nights she cried. There were days she asked herself if she was insane. There were moments like now, where the dream felt so far away, it didn't seem like it belonged to her anymore. But she kept going, because she knew something they didn't. Freedom wasn't about the end. It was about the choice. The choice to walk away. To say no to a manager who snapped his fingers. To say yes to a Wednesday nap, or a sunrise in a country where no one knew her name. She looked down at her lunch. Lukewarm beans. Half a banana. She smiled. Someday, she'd eat breakfast on a balcony overlooking rice paddies. And it would still be beans, but it would be on her terms. She closed the notebook, tucked it back in her bag. Her break was over. 15 minutes went fast when you were dreaming. She stood up, straightened her shirt, took a last sip of water from a scratch bottle, and walked back onto the sales floor. Customers wouldn't know that behind that quiet smile was a woman racing toward freedom. But she knew, and that was enough. There are budgets that save you, and then there are budgets that break you. Lena had no way of knowing that this particular spreadsheet, with its neatly aligned columns and pale yellow highlights, would be the one that cracked something inside her. It started on a Monday night. Cold. Wind howling through the gaps in the kitchen window. She sat hunched over her second-hand Chromebook, fingers numb, hoodie sleeves pulled down past her wrists. On the table beside her, a half-empty mug of chamomile tea, a nearly overdue rent notice, and a growing sense of tightness behind her eyes. The numbers weren't adding up. They were never supposed to be perfect, but this month was different. Her coworker had called in sick. She'd been offered an extra shift, but the hours had been clawed back when sales didn't meet targets. Her paycheck came in $47 short, and that small gap, less than $50, was the pebble that started an avalanche. She stared at the screen. Rent, $610. Utilities, $118. Groceries, $110. Bus pass, $56. That was her bare minimum. Her barest minimum. And this month, she was under it. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, despite the cold. There wasn't a single category she could cut. Not one. She'd already given up everything. Haircuts were done with dull scissors in the bathroom mirror. Entertainment was whatever was free and ad-supported on YouTube. Groceries were always the same. Beans, rice, spinach, oats. She hadn't eaten a piece of meat in 3 months. She blinked, then closed the spreadsheet, opened her notebook, and there was again that dream number, $300,000. Her fire goal. She was at $7,489 now. So, close to $7,500. It hurt to look at it. She wanted to transfer her next $200 into the brokerage like she did every Friday. She wanted that little line on her net worth tracker to jump, even just a tiny bit. But if she did that this week, she wouldn't make rent. Her hands started shaking. It wasn't the cold. She stood up, walked to the bathroom, and stared at herself in the mirror. Fluorescent lighting overhead. Eyes tired. Shadows under them deeper than usual. Hair pulled back into a sloppy bun. She didn't look like a person chasing early retirement. She looked like a person losing a fight no one else could see. And, for the first time in a long time, she thought about giving up. Just for a second. Maybe this fire thing wasn't for people like her. Maybe it was for tech workers. People with stock options. People who could miss $50 and not notice. Maybe saving like this, cutting this hard, living this lean, was just another kind of prison. She slumped against the wall, slid down to the cold tile floor, buried her face in her arms. It wasn't fair. She'd done everything right. Said no to parties. No to eating out. No to new shoes, even when the soles wore thin and her toes got soaked on the walk to work. She lived on less than $1,100 a month. Most Americans couldn't even imagine that. And still, it wasn't enough. Tears came, quiet and slow. She let them. No one was watching. After a while, she went back to the kitchen, made herself a bowl of plain oats. No honey, no banana, Just oats and hot water. She ate in silence, chewed like it was penance. And when she was done, she opened the Chromebook again. The spreadsheet was still open, so she clicked on the column labeled Investing, and she deleted the number 0. She was going to miss this week's contribution, and somehow, that broke her more than anything else. Not because she lost money, but because for the first time, she'd lost momentum. That was the hardest part. Not the hunger, not the cold, not even the judgment from people who didn't understand why she lived like this. It was the fear that she was standing still. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark. But somewhere inside that stillness, something stirred. A different kind of resolve. If she couldn't contribute this week, she would over-contribute next week. If she missed her goal in December, she would make it up in March. If the world kept trying to pull her back, she would just push harder. She wouldn't let this be the end. That night, Lena made a decision. A brutal one. She emailed her landlord and asked about taking over the empty basement unit in the building. The one with no natural light, no insulation, and no kitchen, just a hot plate. It was $300 a month. $300. Half her current rent. It would mean showering in a communal bathroom down the hall. It would mean sharing walls with rats. It would mean never having guests over again. But it would also mean one thing. Freedom. Sooner. She got the email back within an hour. Yes, it said. It's yours if you want it. She said yes. And 2 weeks later, she moved. The first night in the basement was rough. The walls sweated. The radiator clanged like a prison bell. Her mattress sat directly on the floor. The only window was a glass block above eye level, half covered in grime. She lay awake and stared at the ceiling, listened to the pipes groan above her. She felt like she'd fallen. But in truth, she climbed. She just learned that the climb didn't always feel like rising. Sometimes it felt like shrinking. Sometimes it felt like loss. But it was progress, all the same. In her new space, she lit a single candle, opened her notebook, and wrote something new across the top. This is the sacrifice. Not the end. Not the failure. Not the punishment. The sacrifice. The rent dropped. The savings jumped. She found herself putting in $300 some weeks. Caught up faster than she expected. The hole filled. And the pain faded. Eventually, the rats left. Eventually, she stopped noticing the cold. Eventually, she started smiling again, quietly, just to herself, when she transferred another deposit into her account. She hadn't given up. She'd doubled down. Because the budget hadn't broken her after all. It had revealed the place where her resolve would either collapse or sharpen. And Lena Morales sharpened. It happened on a Tuesday. One of those gray, forgettable days where nothing feels important and everything feels a little heavier than usual. The kind of day retail workers call dead air. No customers, no commission, just fluorescent lights and time crawling across the tile floor. Lena was on register. Again, the new girl had called out, and the store manager, Curtis, handed her the headset like it was a crown of thorns. Just keep the line moving, he muttered. There was no line. There hadn't been one for the past 2 hours. Lena stood behind the counter with her arms crossed. Weight shifted to one side to ease the ache in her left knee. She'd been working 5 days straight. Double shift on Sunday. Overtime denied again. Her face showed nothing. But inside, she was unraveling. She reached for her water bottle, took a slow sip, and let her eyes wander toward the customer service desk. 2 other employees stood there, laughing. A manager and a senior sales rep. They thought they were whispering. They weren't. Lena heard everything. She's been here for what, 5 years? Still makes less than $16 an hour. Yeah, and she won't take leadership training. Says she's not interested. Girls got no ambition. They laughed. And something inside Lena snapped. Not loudly. Not violently. Just cleanly. Like a wire quietly cutting loose from the wall. They were talking about her. Of course they were. And the worst part wasn't what they said. It was that they were right. She had been there 5 years. She had turned down leadership training. She hadn't applied for assistant manager. She'd stayed in the same spot. Same uniform. Same pay. To them, she was wasting her life. To them, ambition looked like a better title and a 10-cent raise. To them, success was climbing a ladder in a building she was already trying to leave. But Lena didn't flinch. Because she finally understood something. Their ladder was not her ladder. Their version of growth wasn't growth at all. It was just deeper entrenchment. The more she gave them, the more they would take. A better title didn't mean more freedom. It meant more responsibility, more hours, more stress, and less energy to work on the only thing that actually mattered. Her exit. She wasn't unambitious. She was just unaligned. And that was the shift. Right there, behind that dusty register, with the phone beeping and a flickering bulb overhead, Lena Morales stopped feeling guilty for wanting out. She stopped wondering if she was lazy. She stopped apologizing for saying no. She realized this place would never reward her for saving. They'd only reward her for staying. And staying was no longer an option. That night, she walked home with a kind of fire in her chest she hadn't felt in months. She passed the same shuttered storefronts, the same flickering streetlights. But everything looked different now. Sharper, simpler. She opened her notebook and wrote one sentence across the top of a fresh page. I will not build a life I need to escape from. It was more than a goal. It was a decision. Because here's the thing they didn't know about Lena. She'd been watching them too. She saw the way Curtis checked his watch every 10 minutes. Saw the sales rep rub his temples like they held his stress in place. Saw the way the assistant manager clutched her coffee like it was in 4 drip, her smile fading the second customers turned their backs. They weren't living. They were maintaining. No wonder they didn't understand her. She didn't want to maintain anything. She wanted to disappear. To walk out of this place one day and never look back. To never ask permission to take a weekend off. To never explain why she was 5 minutes late. To never pretend to care about someone's broken TV or expired coupon. She wanted to live small, so she could live free. And she was getting closer. The basement unit saved her hundreds. Her side hustle, a quiet gig writing subtitles for YouTube videos, was growing. She made $75 last week. Might hit $150 this month. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that the system they worshipped wasn't the only system. That loyalty wasn't the same as security. That success didn't have to look like a promotion. It could look like a spreadsheet with green arrows. It could look like a Roth IRA with compound interest. It could look like walking away. That week, she made another change. She deleted the job alert emails she'd been getting from corporate. She unsubscribed from the Path to Store Leadership newsletter. She stopped playing the game, and she started playing her own. More budgeting, more late nights, more intentional solitude. No one clapped. No one noticed. No one gave her a trophy. But she didn't need one. Because the day of the shift, the day she overheard them laugh and write her off, was the day she finally stepped in her own power. She wasn't stuck. She was strategic. She wasn't aimless. She was stealthy. She wasn't still here. She was on her way out. And soon, when they realized she was gone, they'd never understand how she did it. But Lena would know exactly how. The walls sweated when it rained. That was the first thing she noticed. The paint, once white, had yellowed with age and water damage. The ceiling was low, claustrophobic. Pipes snaked along it like steel veins. There were no windows, just a grimy glass block above the far wall that filtered in a haze of daylight no brighter than moonlight. This was it. Her new home. $300 a month. All utilities included. She stood in the center of the room with her single duffel bag and took a slow, measured breath. It smelled like concrete and mildew. The floor was cold under her socked feet. A space heater hummed in the corner, loud and inefficient. She'd signed the lease 2 days ago. No one had forced her. She chose this because the apartment upstairs, her old place, cost $610. And this basement cave cut that in half. Lena Morales knew exactly what she was doing. This was not a step down. It was a leap forward. She didn't need light. She needed leverage. For the first few nights, she barely slept. The radiator clanged in strange rhythms. Footsteps echoed from the hallway above. She heard arguments from a unit next door, words she couldn't make out, but tones she understood. She kept the lights off as much as possible. Candles were cheaper. Her mattress lay directly on the floor, surrounded by 3 crates she used as tables. No couch, no TV, just a laptop, a kettle, and a dream. But the quiet was perfect. No roommates, no noise, no judgment, just her and the work. She doubled down on everything. Side gigs, freelance captioning, selling secondhand books on eBay. She even started editing resumes for $15 each, clients she found through Reddit forums and word of mouth. Her income rose slowly, but her costs, they dropped like a stone. No internet. She used a free Wi-Fi at the library or Starbucks. No phone plan, just Wi-Fi calling. No fridge. She kept perishables in a cooler by the window block and ate mostly canned food. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt rich. Because every time she said no to something, no to new shoes, no to delivery pizza, no to comfort, she was saying yes to something else. Freedom. She could feel it in her bones. Every Friday, she opened her notebook with reverence, logged her new numbers, moved another $200, sometimes $250, into her investments. Her total net worth ticked up like a quiet drumbeat. 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. The digits weren't impressive to anyone else. But to Lena, they were everything. They were proof. She wasn't just surviving. She was building something. One cold night in January, she sat curled in a blanket, notebook in her lap, tea steaming in a cracked mug. She flipped her FIRE timeline, her goal chart. Originally, she'd marked her target age as 38. But now she crossed it out. She wrote, 35. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. With this new lifestyle, this extreme drop in cost, and the rising power of compound interest, she could make it. If she held the line. And that was the hardest part. Not the poverty. Not really. It was the temptation. She'd walk past bakeries on her way to the bus, smell fresh bread, and feel her stomach twist. She'd hear her coworkers talk about going to concerts, buying new coats, ordering dinner, and feel like she was on another planet. She missed softness. She missed light. But she didn't miss the panic. She didn't miss the noise in her head every time rent was due. She didn't miss wondering whether she'd ever stop running. Here, underground, there was no one to impress, no one to perform for, no social pressure, no appearances to keep up. She wore the same sweater every day, washed her clothes in the sink, line dried them on a rope she strung across the room. And every time she felt the urge to complain, she reminded herself, this was not forever. It was a season, a sacred one, and someday, this would be the part of the story no one believed. Someday, someone would ask how she did it, and she'd say, I live in a basement for 18 months. Alone. Cold. On purpose. And they'd laugh. But she'd know the truth. She made herself small to build something big. One night, the building lost power. She lit 2 candles and pulled her mattress closer to the wall for warmth. Outside, freezing rain hissed against the ground. She opened her laptop, battery at 11%, logged in her brokerage. Her balance, $13,007. She smiled, not because it was a lot, but because it was working. No one saw her, but she saw herself, clearer than ever before. It wasn't the numbers that changed first. It was her mind. Lena had always thought financial independence was about reaching a number, $300,000 for $100,000, maybe more if she played it safe. But somewhere in the silence of that basement, in the bitter cold of another frugal morning, she realized something that stunned her. She already felt free. Not completely. Not on paper. Her net worth was still modest. Her job still paid $15.75. She still lived in a room that hadn't seen daylight in weeks. But something inside her had cracked open. And in the space where anxiety used to live, a strange calm had moved in. She called it the fireproof mindset. It didn't happen overnight. It started one morning in February. Snow pelted the street like it had a grudge. Lena sat on her mattress, wrapped in 2 blankets, sipping hot tea from her favorite chipped mug. Her hands were numb, but her eyes were clear. She just read a blog post by someone who had reached FIRE at 37. The comments underneath were filled with disbelief. This isn't realistic for normal people. You must have had rich parents. What's the point of being frugal if you're miserable? But Lena didn't agree with any of it. She wasn't miserable. She was alive, awake, intentional. She had no rich parents, no trust fund, no fallback plan. She had willpower. She had purpose. And slowly, she realized something others couldn't see. She didn't have to wait until she hit the number to feel what she was chasing. Freedom, it turned out, wasn't only about financial security. It was about agency. And she had that now. She chose her life. Every part of it. The cold, the solitude, the secondhand sweaters, the rice and beans. She chose all of it. She wasn't a victim of her circumstances anymore. She was the author of them. That's when the fear began to fade. No more panic about broken appliances. No more dread about unexpected bills. She'd learned to live on so little that almost nothing could surprise her anymore. One week, The library closed for maintenance. That had been her Wi-Fi source. Instead of spiraling, she took a notebook to the park and wrote down ideas for new side gigs. Another week, her side hustle stalled. No clients. No captions to edit. She didn't freak out. She tightened her budget. Pushed the grocery spend even lower. Oats. Frozen kale. Lentils. Simple. Steady. Her friends still didn't understand. When she met up with a former coworker at a coffee shop, she only ordered water. They blinked in disbelief. Why would you live like that if you don't have to? Lena just smiled. Because that was the secret they never grasped. She didn't have to. She wanted to. Because every dollar she didn't spend was another brick in the wall she was building, between herself and the life she never wanted to go back to. She didn't need retail therapy. She didn't need approval. She didn't need constant pleasure. She needed peace. And she was finding it, bit by bit, week by week. She developed rituals. Morning candle. Tea. Notebook. She made time to read. Free ebooks. Borrowed paperbacks. Personal finance blogs. She walked everywhere. Watched the city breathe. When a coworker bought a new iPhone and bragged about the 0% financing, Lena just nodded. She didn't envy them anymore. She pitied them. Not because they had less money, but because they had less control. They didn't know what it meant to feel untouchable. To walk into a grocery store and know you could afford anything on the shelf and still choose beans. To hear your boss yell about metrics and shrinkage and not flinch because you know someday soon you won't need the job at all. To see the ads and sales and shiny distractions and feel nothing but quiet amusement. That was power, and Lena had earned it. She didn't dress it up for Instagram. She didn't post spreadsheets or net worth flexes. Her journey wasn't a hashtag. It was a discipline, a devotion, a vow, and it was working. She crossed $15,000 by spring, then $17,000, then $20,000. Every milestone reminded her she wasn't dreaming. She was executing. And as her balance grew, so did her confidence. She started helping others. Quietly. Anonymously. On forums. In comment sections. Sometimes on Reddit. Answering DMs. Sometimes face-to-face, when a cashier whispered, "How do you make your money stretch like that?" She never gave the full story. She just said, "Live on less than you think you can." Because that was the truth. Most people weren't living. They were consuming. Most people weren't earning. They were spending. Most people weren't saving. They were surviving. Lena had left all of that behind. The fireproof mindset wasn't about immunity to poverty. It was about indifference to lifestyle inflation. She didn't need better. She didn't need more. She had enough. She was enough. And with every quiet decision, every skipped latte, every reused tea bag, every $200 investment, she was burning a path forward. She kept a quote on the wall above her mattress. Just one. Discipline equals freedom. The first time she read it, it sounded cold, rigid, but now it felt like love. It started with a photo. A sunset over Doi Sudhep. Golden lights spilling across a sea of rooftops. Temple bells in the distance. Motorbikes humming along narrow streets. People laughing. Eating mango sticky rice under red paper lanterns. It looked like another world. Because it was Chiang Mai. A place Lena had never heard of until one night, curled under her blanket, browsing the fire's subreddit by candlelight. Someone had posted, living off $750 per month in Thailand. Retired at 34. AMA. She clicked, and everything shifted. It wasn't just the numbers, though those were jaw-dropping. Rent for $280 a month. Street food for $1.50. Health insurance under $100. Fiber internet. Warm weather. Kind people. It was the tone of the post. It didn't sound like an escape. It sounded like a rebirth. Lena's heart beat faster as she read through every line, every comment. It wasn't a fantasy blog or influencer brag. It was a person like her. A frugal minimalist. An intentional escape artist. Someone who said no to more, so they could say yes to less. That night, Lena didn't sleep. She researched everything. Chiang Mai apartments, cost of living indexes, visa options. She watched walking tours on YouTube, listened to language tutorials, scrolled through blog posts about digital nomads, early retirees, geoarbitrage. She was still wrapped in a thrifted blanket, the walls still sweating in her basement apartment, but her mind had already crossed an ocean. For months, she'd been focused on numbers. $300,000 saved. $1,000 per month withdrawal. The classic 4% rule. But now, a new calculation emerged. What if she didn't need $300,000? What if she only needed $150,000? That changed everything. It made freedom feel closer, realer. The very next morning, she opened her notebook and tore out her FIRE timeline. She started fresh. Chiang Mai wasn't just a dream. It was the exit strategy. She kept it quiet, of course. No one at work would understand. She could already hear them. You're gonna move where? You don't even speak Thai. What if you get sick? But Lena knew better than to let fear run the math. She looked at her life, her actual life, and asked the question that most people never dare to ask. What do I actually need? Not to impress, not to posture, just to live. And the truth? She didn't need much. A safe place to sleep, nutritious food, sunlight, Wi-Fi, a library, space to think, time to breathe. She could have all of that in Chiang Mai for less than she spent in Columbus. She started setting new goals. Save $30,000 for move. Research 3-month visa options. Find expat budgeting blogs. Join digital nomad forums. It gave her momentum again, something to run toward, not just away from. The basement didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a launch pad. Every dollar she saved had new power now. Not just compound interest, but escape velocity. And the more she read, the more she realized Chiang Mai wasn't some backwater village. It was a hub, a haven for dreamers and digital workers. A place where no one wore heels or carried briefcases. Where the currency of value wasn't status, but time. Time to write. Time to walk. Time to eat slowly. Time to be. She began meditating. 10 minutes a day, cross-legged on the floor. No app. Just breath. Silence. Awareness. She practiced Thai greetings. S was D. Hello. Kop kun. Thank you. She visualized herself riding a scooter through the old city. Drinking iced coffee under palm trees. Walking through night markets with cash in her pocket and no debt in her heart. The city called to her like a whisper. Not loud, but steady. Every paycheck, she set aside $100 into her Chiang Mai fund. It was slow at first, but it added up. Fast. And for the first time since starting this journey, she didn't feel alone. She started emailing others on FIRE forums. Messaging people already abroad. Asking for advice. Learning from their mistakes. One woman had moved to Chiang Mai with $40,000 and never looked back. Another man had retired there after a factory job in Detroit. Never even went to college. They weren't trust fund kids. They were just tired people who got smart. People like her. And they all said the same thing. I wish I had come sooner. So Lena made a promise to herself. She wouldn't wait for perfection. She wouldn't wait until she was ready. She would go when she was willing. She would go before the job broke her spirit. Before the next manager made her forget her own name. Before she traded another 5 years of freedom for 5 more years of fear. And slowly, the walls of her basement began to look different. They weren't cracked and gray anymore. They were temporary. She was temporary. Everything around her, the job, the building, the uniform, the shift schedule, it was all temporary. But her dream? That was permanent. She taped a photo of Chiang Mai to the wall above her mattress. It wasn't a high-res printout, just something she'd cut from a travel magazine at the library. It showed the sun rising over a golden temple, mist curling through the hills. And underneath it, she wrote, "This is waiting for me. I just have to get there." And she would. It was a Friday. The kind of Friday that usually dragged, customers impatient, managers tense, co-workers already halfway out the door in their minds. But Lena was calm. There was a strange peace in her chest. Heavy, quiet, and rooted. It hadn't come from money. Not exactly. She still lived in that same windowless basement. Still brought rice and spinach in a reused takeout container. Still wore the same 2 shirts on rotation. Still made $15.75 an hour. But something had shifted. She knew her countdown had started. Not a guess. Not a wish. A fact. 6 months left. That's what her timeline said. Her Chiang Mai fund was past $5,000. Her brokerage account had passed $30,000. She ran the numbers a dozen times. Double-checked inflation. Adjusted for healthcare costs abroad. Accounted for visa-run flights and housing deposits. And it all told her the same thing. She was close. Close enough to stop being afraid. So when it happened that day, when the voice barked over the intercom like thunder through a calm sky, she didn't flinch. Lena. Manager's office. Now. Heads turned. The guy in appliances raised an eyebrow. Someone in mobile chuckled nervously. Lena didn't react. She clocked out her register, slipped her badge in her back pocket, and walked toward the glass door like she'd done it 1,000 times. Inside, Curtis sat at the desk. He didn't look up right away. He flipped through papers like he was waiting to feel more important before speaking. Lena stood quietly. Finally, he looked up. You missed a warranty pitch yesterday. Guest report says you didn't mention it. She blinked. That was it. Curtis narrowed his eyes, waiting for her to explain herself. Maybe apologize. Maybe plead. But Lena didn't say anything. She didn't need to. He tapped his pen twice on the desk. You've been with us a long time, Lena. We expect better from senior associates. Still, she said nothing. Not from fear, but because something was happening in real time, right there in that windowless office under buzzing fluorescent light. She was detaching. Emotionally. Mentally. She realized, in that exact moment, that he couldn't touch her anymore. Not really. Because this job no longer owned her. It was just a bridge, and she was already halfway across. She saw it in his face, the confusion. He expected shame, or at least resistance. A defense. Something. But Lena simply nodded. I'll do better, she said softly. Not because she meant it, but because it didn't matter. Curtis stared a moment longer, then waved her off. She turned and left the room without looking back. The hallway outside smelled like copier ink and old carpet. A poster on the wall read, Your attitude determines your altitude, with a cartoon eagle smiling like it had dental insurance. She almost laughed. It was surreal. Like watching a movie you used to believe was real, but suddenly saw for what it was. Bad writing, cheap props, no plot. She walked back to her station, tapped her badge against the reader, and resumed folding Bluetooth speakers onto a clearance shelf. But something in her posture had changed. She stood taller. Her breath was deeper. Her movements slower, more deliberate. Because now she knew. This place didn't define her. It didn't deserve her. And most importantly, it wouldn't keep her. That night, she walked home under a sky the color of charcoal. Snowflakes fell like soft apologies. Her boots were worn. Her coat was too thin. But she didn't feel cold. Not anymore. She stepped into her apartment. Bare concrete, candlelight, a mattress, and a single photo of Chiang Mai on the wall. And she smiled. This was the end game. This was the season of almost. The final climb before the summit. There was nothing left to prove. She wasn't chasing approval. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She wasn't hoping things would magically get better. She had built this with her own hands. Every skipped shift meal, every second-hand sweater, every dollar denied to the present to feed the future. And now the future was so close. She could almost taste the street food. She lit a candle, opened her notebook, drew a single line. Today I didn't flinch. And that was the truest sign of change. Not the balance in her account, not the new budget, not even the Chiang Mai fund. It was the stillness in her, the unshakable center. The moment when fear knocked on the door, and she didn't answer. There was no dramatic farewell, no mic drop, no Facebook post with inspirational quotes, no coworkers tearing up, no boss begging her to stay. Just one final clock-out beep, one last walk through sliding doors, and the soft sound of freedom falling like rain on her shoulders. It was Lena's last day. Officially, she hadn't told anyone. There were no goodbye donuts, no awkward speeches, no "we'll miss you" card passed around with 4 signatures. Just a form submitted quietly to HR. A resignation effective 2 weeks from the day she made peace with her plan. She told them she had family obligations overseas, which in a way was true. She owed herself something. She owed the younger version of Lena, the one who once cried in her lunch in the break room, the one who did the math while customers barked in her face, the one who traded heat for savings, more than just gratitude. She owed her escape, and today, she was delivering it. Her shift started like any other. Blue polo, hair tied back, old sneakers double-knotted. The headset slid behind her ears like muscle memory. She moved through the store, zoning shelves, assisting customers, resetting displays. She smiled. She nodded. She answered questions with polite efficiency. But inside, she was somewhere else. Chiang Mai. Mango trees. Motorbikes. Sunrise over Doi Sut Hep. She carried it all on her chest like a secret flame. She didn't need to imagine anymore. It was real now. Her Chiang Mai fund had cleared $8,000. Her investments passed $35,000. Her total assets, with some hustle, would reach nearly $50,000 by departure. Enough for 2 years abroad. Enough to breathe. Enough to figure out the next chapter without panic. And most importantly, enough to never have to come back. She checked her watch. 2 hours left. As she walked toward the bag for a break, she passed Ian Audio. He waved, oblivious. Hey, we still on for bowling next week? She paused. This was the moment. The closest thing she'd have to a goodbye. She smiled. Actually, I'm heading out soon. Out. She nodded gently. Moving overseas. Going solo for a while. Ty blinked. Like vacation? No, she said. Like life. He didn't get it. Most wouldn't. And that was okay. In the break room, she sat down at her usual spot. Second from the back. Same chair. Same fold in the plastic seat. The vending machine hummed behind her. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone opened the microwave, revealing something overcooked and steaming. She pulled out her notebook one last time. The cover was frayed beyond recognition now. Pages dog-eared, margins scribbled. It looked like the kind of book people throw away. But for Lena, it was scripture. She turned to the final page, wrote the date, and underneath it, 2 words. I'm free. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed, because this was not an ending. It was a release. 1 hour left. She folded a stack of clearance flyers, helped a customer reset their phone, answered a question about Bluetooth connectivity. Her voice was calm, practiced, but her eyes? They were somewhere else. And when 5 o'clock hit, she didn't hesitate. She walked to the back, clocked out, handed in her badge, and stepped outside. The parking lot was quiet, windless, the sky smeared with late afternoon gold. She zipped her coat, pulled her scarf higher, and started walking. There was no applause, just the sound of her boots on the pavement, and her heart beating steady. She didn't look back. Not once. She passed the intersection, crossed the same corner she had 1,000 times before. The traffic light changed. Cars rolled past. Everything was the same, except her. She was no longer just a retail worker. She was a strategist, a planner, an architect of her own life. She didn't have millions in the bank. She didn't need them. She had time. She had space. She had options. And that was worth more than any title on a name tag. She reached her apartment. The basement door creaked open. She stepped inside. Concrete walls. Candlelight. The Chiang Mai photo still taped above her mattress. She stood in front of it, stared at the colors, the curves of the mountain, the little golden dome of the temple. She whispered, I'm coming. Then she sat down and began the final checklist. Sell a mattress. Cancel local bills. Convert savings to an international card. Apply for visa exemption. Book the flight. And one more thing. Write a letter. Not to her job. Not to a friend. To herself. She began slowly. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold. You gave up everything people said you needed. And in return, you got back something they never could understand. She paused, then added, You are not escaping. You are returning. To yourself. And that was the truth. This wasn't running away. This was going home. Even if that home was a place she had never been before. The sun rose slow. Not like back home, where it slipped over rooftops and industrial silhouettes and telephone wires. Here, in Chiang Mai, it unfolded. Wide, golden, as if the sky itself had taken a deep breath before revealing what came next. Lena Morales stood barefoot on the tiled balcony of her new apartment, both hands wrapped around a cup of black tea. Below, the street was waking up. Quiet motorbikes, a tuk-tuk rumbling in the distance, birdsong, someone sweeping a storefront. It was 6:12 a.m., and she was home, not just in geography, in breath, in bone. She had arrived yesterday, after a 22-hour flight, 3 layovers, a bout of dizziness, and 1 sleepless hotel night with a ceiling fan that clattered like an old train engine. She'd barely eaten on the plane. She felt like she'd been wrung out and left in the sun. But this morning, she had landed, and not just on foreign soil, in a new life. The apartment was simple. Studio layout, whitewashed walls, a mattress on a wooden platform, a desk by the window, a tiny balcony with 2 plastic chairs, and a view of the neighborhood. Rent, $260 a month. Wi-Fi included. It was more than she needed, more than she'd ever had. She stepped back inside, toes brushing the cool tile, and smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Her skin looked different, her eyes lighter, her whole frame softer, like she'd let go of something. Because she had. She'd let go of the version of herself who needed to be tough all the time, who measured worth in productivity, who believed she had to fight for every breath of peace. Here, the air came freely. Her first night, she'd sat on the floor, eating mango sticky rice from a street vendor 2 blocks away. It cost less than a cup of coffee back in Ohio. And it was, without exaggeration, the best thing she'd tasted in a decade. Not because it was sweet, but because it was earned. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not the barista who once scoffed when she pulled out exact change. Not the manager who clock-watched her breaks. Not the friends who said she was extreme for bringing her own lunch to weddings. They didn't see this. They didn't see her. But she did. Everywhere she turned, Chiang Mai shimmered with quiet possibility. The streets were narrow, lined with shops and temples and outdoor cafes. Elderly women sold grilled bananas for pennies. Teenagers zipped past on scooters, laughing like they had forever. Monks in saffron robes walked barefoot, bowls in hand, heads bowed. There was no rush here, and no apology for slowing down. She liked that. She liked it a lot. Her plan was simple now. No job, no schedule, just 6 months of stillness. She had $50,000 split between her Chiang Mai account and her brokerage back home. She ran the numbers over and over, even after arrival. Her monthly costs wouldn't exceed $750 unless something dramatic happened. And if they did, she'd figure it out. She knew how to stretch. She'd learned long ago how to bend without breaking. And more than that, she knew how to wait. She'd wait for clarity, for the next calling, for what came after fire. Because no one talks about that part. They talk about how to get there, but not what to do once you arrive. Lena had thought about that, sitting in her basement, and she'd promised herself, when the noise stops, I'll listen. And now it had stopped. So she listened, to the wind in the palm trees, to the laughter of children skipping rope in the alley, to the quiet rhythm of her own breath, steady and unburdened. She spent her first week walking, not sightseeing, not photographing, just walking. She found a quiet temple tucked between apartment buildings, its golden dome half hidden behind papaya trees. She started going there in the mornings, sitting cross-legged on a cushion, listening to the silence between the birds. She didn't pray. She just was. And that was enough. She met other travelers, an Australian freelance writer, a retired math teacher from Texas, a German woman who ran an online sew business. They met for breakfast sometimes at a cafe with floor cushions and cold brew. No one asked what she did. No one cared. They talked about books, and language, and how to make soup with lemongrass. She liked that. She journaled more now. Her notebook had changed. The cover was new, the pages unlined, the handwriting slower. She wrote about presents. She wrote about mornings. She wrote about mangoes. She didn't check her brokerage every day anymore. She didn't track every expense. She didn't panic if she spent $2 more than planned. Because the mindset had outlived the math. She no longer needed fire to feel free. Because she was. In her heart, in her body, in her spirit. And one morning, as she sipped tea on the balcony, she whispered something aloud to no one at all. I made it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. But it was real. And real was all she'd ever wanted. It began with a little blue polo. That familiar retail shirt, folded into squares, tucked at the very bottom of Lena's suitcase like an artifact from another lifetime. She almost left it in Ohio, but something in her wanted a reminder of the skin she once wore. The day she unpacked in Chiang Mai, she touched the fabric and laughed, soft, half disbelieving. How could one piece of cotton hold so many aches, so many clock-ins, so many swallowed sighs? She pressed it flat, slid it beneath hotel stationery in the dresser, and closed the drawer forever. Weeks passed, then months. The rainy season came and went, washing the streets clean and leaving bright green in its wake. Lena learned the scent of storm clouds, the way lightning cracked over the mountains, the lullaby cadence of roof water trickling into copper drains. She learned to bargain in Thai at the morning market. She learned the heat of bird's-eye chilies, the cool relief of coconut water, the hum of digital freelancers tapping keyboards in corner cafes. She joined them sometimes, editing subtitles on her laptop for a few extra baht. but never for long. Work was no longer a cage. It was a gentle stretch, a choice so whispered if I feel like it. Most dawns she woke without an alarm. No fluorescent ceiling, no basement damp, only the slow pink melt of sunrise filtering across the shutters. She lay still, listening. Tuk-tuk engines in the distance. A gecko clicking on the wall. A temple gong rolling through the valley like distant thunder. The sound did not demand, it invited. She followed, bare feet on cool tile, out onto the balcony with its chipped rail and potted basil. Tea steamed in her cup. Her pulse matched the hum of the city coming alive. And every single morning, she asked herself the same question. Are you here? Yes. Yes. Again, yes. Presence became the benchmark. Not dollars. Not graphs. Not compound interest charts scrawled in frantic pencil. Those had served their purpose. Now her wealth lived in lungs and limbs. An afternoon spent reading by the river, in the slow ballet of laundry, swaying on a bamboo line. She still checked her brokerage once a month, habit more than need. The numbers rose, fell, rose again like breath. She shrugged at the dips, smiled at the climbs, closed the tab, and walked outside. One evening she followed lantern light to a festival near the Fay Gate. Paper animals floated on the moat. Prayers flickered inside wax cups. Laughter lifted like sparks. A stranger offered her a krathong woven of banana leaves, fragrant with marigold. For what you let go, he said. She carried it to the water's edge, kneeled, and thought of heaviness. Final notice letters, 17-hour shifts. Those nights, she rationed oatmeal, because Friday's transfer mattered more than Friday's dinner. She thanked them for forging her. Then she set the little boat among the ripples, and watched the candle drift until distance swallowed the flame. When it vanished, she felt weightlessness in her chest, as if a door had shut on a room she no longer lived in. Months turned. Seasons blurred. January felt like April, felt like August, temperate, forgiving. She counted her 36th birthday in a hill town homestay overlooking rice terraces the color of jade. No sheet cake, no candles, only a bowl of ginger soup and the sound of wind combing through stalks. She wrote herself a letter. You were the woman who disappeared. You slipped through cracks capitalism never patches. You shrank expenses until they broke their grip. You crossed an ocean on the back of a plan no one saw coming. Now you own dawns, and dusk owes you nothing. She tucked the letter in her journal. Later that week, she mailed a postcard to the only address she knew by heart, her sister's apartment in Cleveland. No speech about fire, no lecture on frugality, just a photograph of orange monks walking single file and a single line of ink. I'm happy. Tell Mom not to worry. 3 sentences would have cost extra. She smiled at her old thriftiness, then shrugged. Even freedom has muscle memory. Sometimes memory pricked unexpectedly. Passing an air-conditioned mall, she would catch a whiff of synthetic detergent and be back at the break-room table, foil peeling from beans and rice. Her throat would tighten, not with regret, but with tenderness for the girl who sat alone at a table of scrolling thumbs, whose bravery was invisible. She inhaled, exhaled, let the scent fade, and stepped into the sunlight again. She made friends. A ceramicist from Seoul who taught her to shape clay into cups. A Kenyan coder who ran dawn-hour marathons through the old city moat. A retired pastry chef from Marseille who swore by butter and refused to learn Thai, but loved the local dogs. They drifted through her days like chapters, each leaving a scent, a song, a joke, a recipe. She told none of them the complete story. Pieces were enough. They understood the texture, even if they didn't know the plot. One night the coder asked her over papaya salad, "What's the plan when the money runs low?" She smiled. "I'll make more." He nodded, unsurprised. People here believed in elasticity. Lena's skills multiplied quietly. She taught English online 2 mornings a week, voice polished by years of customer service courtesy. She wrote tiny travel essays for a digital magazine. She edited an ebook for the ceramicist. None paid much, but they paid in choices, and choices were gold. There were lonely hours, yes. 4 walls are 4 walls, whether in Ohio or Chiang Mai. Some afternoons the faces on cafe terraces looked like a blur she couldn't enter. She'd walk back to her apartment, kettle whistling in the silence, and feel the echo of what now. But stillness no longer frightened her. She brewed tea, opened the journal, traced gratitude in slow cursive, and remembered fluorescent buzz, concrete chill, the claustrophobia of debt, the tyranny of store clocks. Memory became medicine. She never bought a scooter. The coder called her stubborn. She laughed and said walking keeps her honest with the city's pace. Besides, she liked arriving a little sweaty. It reminded her that bodies are engines meant to burn, not decorations to pose. 6 months passed, then 9. One morning she woke and realized an entire year had rolled beneath her feet. 12 months since the goodbye shift. 12 months since the last time she scanned a barcode. Since the last time someone timed her brakes. She marked the date with breakfast at a riverside stall, cow soy rich with coconut and lime. The vendor asked if she wanted extra noodles. She said yes. She said yes again when the pastry chef surprised her with a tiny mango tart. She said yes later that afternoon when the ceramicist offered leftover clay. All that saying no in the basement had taught her one beautiful lesson. A yes lands softer when it comes from choice, not craving. That night she opened the dresser drawer and pulled out the folded blue polo. The cotton felt thin, almost translucent. She wondered how it ever contained her. She smoothed the collar, held it up to the single ceiling bulb like a flag of a country she'd renounced. Then she carried it to the balcony, draped it over the rail, and watched moonlight paint it silver. For a moment she thought she might cry, but tears never came. Instead she whispered a blessing. Thank you for being the cage, the catalyst, the cracked shell I had to break. Then she left the shirt for dawn to claim. In the morning it was gone, lifted by wind or claimed by someone who could use a rag or a memory or a piece of cloth that smelled faintly of effort. Weeks later, she began drafting a guide for others. Not a manifesto, not a sermon, just a story told plain. How she saved, where she cut, what she felt, how it hurt, and how it healed. If one tired cashier stumbled on it at midnight in a fluorescent break room, maybe they would feel less alone. Maybe they would taste possibility on the back of their tongue. Maybe they would write a number in a notebook and circle it hard. She finished the draft, closed her laptop, and stepped outside. Night air warm, lanterns bobbing by the river, crickets, distant laughter, incense. She walked without hurry, palms open to the breeze, head tipped back to watch bats twist through starlight. Every step whispered the same impossible truth. You are here because you chose to believe what others called impossible. You are free because you risked being laughed at. You are alive, deeply, ridiculously alive, because rice and beans were never just cheap calories. They were currency for the life you hold now. The path curved toward the temple with a hidden dome. She removed her sandals, felt stone cool beneath her soles, climbed the stairs. Inside, candles flickered against gold leaf. She knelt, not in worship, but in awe of distance traveled. She closed her eyes and listened, long enough to hear her own heartbeat echo back from the walls. It sounded steady, certain, unmistakably hers. When she rose, dawn was tinting the sky pale rose. The city would wake soon. Vendors would slice fruit, monks would collect alms, coffee stalls would hiss steam. She stepped into the soft blue hour, felt dew kiss her ankles, and walked home. Behind her, the temple doors drifted closed. Ahead, the street stretched empty, expectant. And somewhere between the two, neither past nor future, walked a woman who had vanished from the ledger of ordinary life and reappeared in her own legend. Not famous, not rich, simply free. And that was the whole point. She is out there somewhere tonight. Maybe sipping ginger tea on a balcony, maybe watching fireflies over rice fields, maybe helping a stranger bargain in a language she once practiced in whispers. If her story sparks even one quiet notebook scribble, one restless dream rerouted, one whispered promise of, I'm coming, then the cycle continues. Keep listening for the part of you that still believes less can lead to more, that silence can grow into song, that freedom, real freedom, might be waiting just beyond the next brave choice. And when you're ready, we'll meet you on the road. Because dollar by dollar, the journey is yours. Don't forget to subscribe for the next escape story. Share the one lesson this tale gave you in the comments. And if the world tries to tell you it can't be done, remember Lena, the woman who disappeared and did not look back.